Hello and welcome to Neurodiversity and the Three Primary Colours, a space where we look at how we can help neurodiverse classrooms and families function more smoothly. In my last video we had a look at a code communication system or a code language system, and we looked at how we can use this to help direct children's behaviour. And this video we're going to have a wee look at using this communication system to help develop children's social awareness and social skills. Using code words in this way is particularly useful for children with autism or traits of, and that's because these children struggle intuitively to understand social norms and the social kind of hidden rules, and these often need to be explicitly taught. Now, one of the problems here is that teaching children explicitly social skills, for example using social stories, only goes so far, in that a key aspect for many children with autism is actually finding it hard to transfer this social learning into everyday contexts. So what we might be able to naturally understand applies to lots of contexts. Children with ASD or autism often find that very hard. So therefore attaching these code words to the social stories or social learning means that we can very easily and fluidly bring this social learning into everyday life in our families or classrooms. And the best way to explain this is to give you some examples of how I use this in my family context. The first one of those is code correct. So kids with autism often tend to correct other people on nuances, small details, which can have social consequences. So what I would do is I would sit down and use a social story, or just explain or have a conversation with my child about correcting others, how they might feel when they're excessively corrected, and what we can do instead. Then in practice the next day, when I see one of the children correcting me or correcting the other children, I just say code correct, and I can fit it super easy into conversation. And what that does is just invites the child to reflect on how that social learning we previously discussed might fit into this context we're in right now. Another example of how we can use code words in this way in our family is actually a wee code system called code red, code amber and code green. Children with autism often find it difficult to pick up on the non-verbal language of others, so might not necessarily know when it's a good time to speak. And so for example, if there's an emergency, your child with autism might start asking you questions about dinosaurs, and you would just say to them code red, which means Mummy can't speak at the moment at all. Or if you need a minute, it's not quite the right time to speak just yet, you could say code amber and explain to the child that code amber means Mummy really wants to be able to speak to you right now, but I can't, and when I can, I will let you know. So, and always come back to the child. It's really important if you say code amber that you always do come back to the child. Code green I don't use so much because I don't need it, because the children are constantly coming to me anyway. But certainly code red and code amber have been fantastic in our family, not just at helping the family to function a bit more smoothly, but in terms of teaching the children what kind of contexts they are able to speak in. And I'll give you one more example, though I could give you hundreds, of how we as a family apply code words to social learning, and that is code validate. And a code word like code validate is great for those times where a sibling or a classmate just need acknowledgement or validation about something the other person has done to them. And unfortunately, in those moments, the natural response often for kids on the autistic spectrum is to give quite an expose of their version of events, rather than understanding how to acknowledge and validate the other people's emotions. So again, we can sit down and do a social story or an explanation with the children about the word validation and what that means and why it's important. And a great way to do that is to bring in emotions as well, and how others are feeling and what kind of way they say things and behave when they're feeling upset. And then we use the word validate if we see the child starting to respond in a way that's not validating to their sibling or classmate. And that can be brilliant, not only to teach the child that this is an example of context where that's needed, but also just to de-escalate fighting in situations before they get out of hand. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you catch my next video on yet another way we can use this code language system to help families and classrooms function more smoothly.